This is at-one-ment or atonement. So this is a painting on the third floor of the Met in New York. It's by Barnett Newman, and it's called One-ment, which is not a word. And if you put at in front of it, it becomes atonement. And I'm going to give you this new definition to realize your inner wholeness. So the tool we're going to use for this is forgiveness. And again, there's a whole book about this, how to release your resentments. So there's a beautiful quote by Suzuki Roshi who says, "You're perfect and there's room for improvement." So for me, it's very interesting. When I teach this course in the longer version, again, I'm interested in consciousness, and I think that the dialectic in our culture, and it's kind of transitioning out. Like when we have this culture, if you look at narrative theory, it's all based on conflict. And, you know, you have the thesis, the antithesis, and it equals a synthesis. And that is our understanding of how we get to truth. So in my house, when I was growing up, I would say, look, the sky's blue. And then someone would be like, yeah, but it's going to rain tomorrow. So notice the way you respond to things, because I think we're all primed to be searching for truth. So do we normally look to say the opposite in some ways? It's fascinating to me because there are ramifications of this, right? I mean, if you're always doing that, you're going to come off as hypercritical, and the person's going to be like, I'm just going to shut up because, you know, this person just jettisons, gainsays everything I say. Okay. The reason I went into that was because, and Kierkegaard wrote a book on this called Either Or. I think that's a foible of human consciousness. So you're perfect and there's room for improvement. Again, if you know the rabbit duck image, which I didn't bring in today, your mind can't hold these opposite thoughts at the same time. So it's like one or the other, or it flickers. So you're perfect and there's room for improvement. It's a very interesting concept. So if we were going to go through some meditations, what I would say is we do an observing your thoughts meditation, and then I would ask you what part of you was observing your thoughts, right? And some people point here, some people point here, but the point is that you are not your thoughts. And the way you think in this dialectical manner, everything is in two, like you think of everything's its opposite, like black, white, tall, short, things like that. I think it's a real problem. I think it's a problem, and it's caused a lot of wars and conflict in our culture that are unnecessary. Okay, so your mind was built because of the traumas of just normal life. It was built to create woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't, grievance stories, right? And your mind thinks these things, shouldn't have happened. So I love this quote by Eckhart Tolle, who says, you either accept your life or change it. Any other position is insane. So if you complain about something, if you said, I would have been better if my parents didn't get divorced, or if I had gone to this other school, or blah, blah, blah. If you think about it, it's not really rational. It's like in my book, it's chapter 8, it's called Trying to Shove a Square Peg into a Round Hole. So the way we clean up our past so that we can show up authentically for the present moment is through forgiveness. And I'll give you a new definition of forgiveness. It's not condoning someone else's behavior. It's releasing your right to resent that something happened. So, ressentiment en français, is again, sentiment, sentiment. So you're re-feeling things from 20, 30 years ago. So do me a favor, everyone raise your hand like this. On the count of 3, I'd like you to clap last Thursday. 1, 2, clap last Thursday. Clap last year. Okay, so you can't change the past. What good does it do complaining about it? And yet, that's what your mind was built to do. Create grievance stories about the past. So whatever happened in the past happened, and the only thing that exists today is your story about that. And the problem is that when we create these stories, they add judgments. And this is where the Buddha was so specific about the distinction between discernment and judgment. Discernment is look both ways before you cross the road. Judgment is our cars are bad, right? And that's the way you tell the story, right? Influences how other people are enrolled in your narrative, because you're adding this thing that you actually don't mean to add. This shouldn't have happened. So I was at the Compassion Conference in Seattle in 2008, and someone asked Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's your greatest teacher? And so the obvious answer is the Buddha, right? Because he's the foremost spokesperson of Buddhism. So what does His Holiness say when asked, who's your greatest teacher? He says, the Chinese, who beat to death 2 million of his people with hatchet handles and hammers and just the most god-awful things since the Holocaust. That's his greatest teacher. So it's interesting to me because, if you're getting divorced from someone, you normally don't look at them and say, well, thank you for being my greatest teacher. But, in 30 or 40 years, you could say that, that is the case. The problem is that our stories that we create with these judgments keep us hooked into the past. And so anytime you hear that should or should not, that's a resentment, a ressentiment. So everyone from the 12-step program knows this phrase. Resentment is like poking yourself in the eye and waiting for the other person to go blind. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to get sick, right? You're only hurting yourself. And that's why I teach these classes on forgiveness, cleaning up the past so that you can show up authentically in the present moment. And then when Rosencrantz and Guildenstern come up to Hamlet in Act 5, Scene 2, Act 5, they're trying to trick him into this thing. And he says, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. There's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Nietzsche says, there's no such thing as a moral phenomenon. There are only moral interpretation of phenomena. So good or bad doesn't exist out there. It's our understanding of these things. But this is, again, put most beautifully by Miles Davis. It is what it is. So forgiveness is the ability to accept a no. It's the ability to accept this happened. My previous cat did die. Things happen. And you want to figure out a way to release your mind, creating the woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't, the resentment, that because you're adding this judgment, this shouldn't have happened, and basically, I'd be happy now, and I wouldn't have to take these antidepressants if that shit didn't happen. Forgiveness means giving up all hope of having a better past. There's a beautiful quote, I can't get it right now. It's by Milan Kundera, and he says, the only reason we're interested in creating a better future is in order to create a better past. Again, we become what we love and we become what we hate, and both are inauthentic. Like, it's interesting, just check in with yourself tonight, see, are you successful in some particular arena, out of spite? What's your motivating factor? Again, who is the author of your desires? It's not one thing. I'm not proselytizing. I'm just trying to raise consciousness so that you have some new thoughts and are able to, hopefully, in trying situations, think better thoughts. Okay, unforgiveness, if you're not willing to forgive, is your desire to share your suffering. So I had my face blown off my head when I was 18 years old in a car accident. My femur shattered, and for 25 years after that, I walked around and people come up to me in the bar and say, how'd you get that scar on your face? And I would say, I was almost killed in a car accident. And it worked quite well for 25 years. And then I took a class like this, and you had to recount the story of your life, and then someone else basically deconstructed it. So I was there with this guy, and I said I was almost killed in a car accident. He goes, no, you weren't. And I was like, my face was blown off my head. They called in someone to amputate my leg. They didn't notify my parents. Trust me, I was almost killed in a car accident. He said, no, you weren't. No. There was a car accident. Everything else you added. Language creates reality. The way you choose to tell your story about your life enrolls other people, and then you are that person. So again, we have to figure out new ways to express ourselves. And I'm going to give you a couple in a minute, because it's this way of being that we suck everybody into our drama, and we're subconsciously making ourselves victims or heroes just by the way we choose our addiction. This is a bumper sticker, and it's a bumper sticker because it's cliche, and cliches are cliches because they're true. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is optional. Pain is unavoidable in life, So pain does not cause suffering. It's our intolerance of pain that causes suffering. Pain is immediate, right? If I'm in pain, my arm's broken, it's like, stop thinking about dinner, stop thinking about your next vacation destination, like you need to get to a hospital and set this arm, right? That's what pain is. But again, years later, we're suffering because of things that happened last Thursday. You can't change the past, but you're causing your own suffering. So the way to clean this up, I mean, if someone has a better way, that'd be fantastic. But from what I've learned, it's through forgiveness. And again, if you're not willing to forgive somebody, it just means you're not done suffering. So we have a very serious problem in our culture with grief. I believe in the DSM-4, I haven't looked at this in some time, but they conflate. So if you go in, there's 9 symptoms of depression. And the physician, doctor, psychiatrist is supposed to also ask if there's been a death, like in the family, in the last 2 weeks. And for the DSM-5, that was called the bereavement exemption. I got it. Bereavement, here I'm going to hurt myself, pat myself on the back. Bereavement exemption. And in the DSM-5, that was eliminated, and the rationale was because they found that the same medication that worked on depression also worked on bereavement. Now think about that. You call your boss up, you say, my son was hit by a car and killed. And she says, it's really awful, you should take 2 weeks off work. That's the culture you live in, right? That's capitalism. You get 2 weeks off if something tragic and traumatic happens. Again, so Foucault talks about systems of thought, right? So who's the author of your desires? Why do you think the things that you think? And we need to look at these systems, and that's what I do in the first book, like the myth of romantic love. So if you read Denis de Rougemont, 1949, L'Homme et l'Occident, Love in the Western World, he says that romantic love is esoteric to Western civilization. It's about 750 years old. It's based on the myth of Tristan and Isolde, and this whole thing about like us feeling unwhole, and there's a missing part of us out there, and when we find our soulmate, we'll feel whole, like Tom Cruise and Renee Zellweger in the elevator when he says, "You complete me." Like, what does that mean? Well, it means you're fucked, because she's not always going to be there. So the Buddha taught skillful means, and we were given, again, without any blame, just as an observation, through the systems of thought in the 60s and 70s, we learned these unskillful solutions. And the reason I'm raising consciousness around these things today is because we have to be the ones that say it stops with us. I mean, I'll just go into an extreme example, the Palestinian-Israeli situation. Our understanding of justice comes from the Code of Hammurabi, which means that I feel terrible, and the only way I know that justice is served is to know that you feel as terrible as I feel. So, your son killed my son in a terrorist attack, so that means that, like, I have to kill your son. That's the logic behind the death penalty. And, what is that? What's the Mahatma Gandhi, everyone knows this, an eye for an eye, Code of Hammurabi, an eye for eye leaves the whole world blind, So we don't have, our system of justice is actually a system of revenge. And somebody has to admit that. And that's one of the faults of our society, right? Because we enjoy revenge. We just have to admit it. And then we have to figure out, like, is this advancing us as a culture? Or like some of the Buddhists, maybe we should time to say, like, my religion is compassion. And, maybe some brave Israeli and Palestinian mother will just say, it stops with me. I will break this chain of unskillful solutions. So again, if we're doing this class in a longer format, I would ask you to meditate on any grudges that you hold. Who would you need to forgive, to release those machinations in your head, those ruminations, that like, oh, I'd be happy now if this didn't happen or that didn't happen, It happened, right? Clap last Thursday. You can't change the past. What good does it do complaining about it,